The auditorium of Lincoln High School hummed with the energy of graduation season. Soft stage lights cast a warm glow over the mahogany podium where student speakers would soon share their thoughts on achievement, dreams, and the future that lay ahead. Parents filled the velvet seats, phones ready to capture their children's moment in the spotlight, while students shifted restlessly in their assigned rows, some excited, others simply eager for the ceremony to end. This was the annual Academic Excellence Assembly, where the school's top performers were recognized for their achievements. Honor roll students, scholarship recipients, and student body leaders would each take their turn at the microphone, offering brief remarks about their high school experience. The atmosphere was celebratory but predictable. Everyone knew what to expect: polished speeches from the children of doctors, lawyers, and business executives. Students whose college plans had been secured since birth, whose futures were as bright and assured as the gleaming trophies that would soon be distributed. Principal Dr. Margaret Walsh approached the podium with her usual grace, scanning the audience with the satisfaction of an educator who had guided countless young people toward success. "Our next speaker," she announced, consulting her notes, "is Emily Carter, valedictorian of this year's graduating class." The name hung in the air for a moment before scattered whispers began to ripple through the crowd. In the back rows, where some of the less academically focused students sat, a few snickers could be heard. "The janitor's kid?" someone whispered, not quite quietly enough. "She's giving a speech? Seriously? What's she going to talk about? Mopping techniques?" Another voice added, followed by muffled laughter. Emily Carter, 17 years old with long brown hair that caught the stage lights, stood up from her seat in the front row. She wore the same navy blue blazer and khaki skirt that comprised Lincoln High's dress code, but somehow she carried herself differently than her classmates. There was something in her posture, straight but not stiff, confident but not arrogant, that spoke of quiet strength earned rather than inherited. As she walked toward the stage, Emily could feel hundreds of eyes tracking her movement. Some gazes held curiosity, others skepticism, and a few carried the casual cruelty that teenagers sometimes wielded without thinking. She had felt these looks before, had learned to navigate the complex social geography of a school where your last name and your parents' profession determined how people saw you. But today was different. Today, Emily had something to say. She climbed the steps to the stage with measured steps, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. The microphone stood waiting, its silver surface gleaming under the spotlights. Behind her, a banner reading "Excellence Through Dedication" stretched across the backdrop, its words taking on new meaning as Emily approached the podium. The auditorium settled into an expectant hush. Dr. Walsh gave Emily an encouraging nod before stepping aside, leaving her alone at the center of the stage. For a moment, Emily simply stood there, her dark eyes scanning the sea of faces before her. She could see her classmates in the front rows, some leaning forward with genuine interest, others sitting back with expressions that suggested they were merely tolerating this interruption to the ceremony's expected rhythm. In the audience, she spotted familiar faces. Mrs. Rodriguez from the guidance office, who had stayed after school countless times to help Emily navigate college applications. Mr. Thompson, her English teacher, whose belief in her writing had first made her consider that she might have something worth saying. And there, in a seat near the back that he'd probably chosen to stay out of the way, was her father. Mark Carter sat with his hands folded in his lap, wearing the one good suit he owned, the same one he'd worn to Emily's mother's funeral 7 years ago, and to every important school event since then. His face showed a mixture of pride and nervousness, the expression of a man who had spent years watching his daughter excel in a world that often overlooked people like him. Emily adjusted the microphone, the small sound echoing through the auditorium's silence. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying easily to the back rows without seeming forced or artificial. "I'm not just here representing myself today," she began, her words cutting through the expectant quiet like a blade through silk. "I'm here representing the man who sweeps every corner of this school so that you have a clean place to sit and learn." The scattered conversations died instantly. Even the students who had been checking their phones looked up, caught by something unexpected in her tone. I'm here representing every parent who works two jobs so their children can have opportunities they never had. I'm here for everyone who has ever been judged by what their family does instead of who they choose to become. In the sudden, complete silence that followed, Emily Carter had the attention of every person in that auditorium. Where are you watching this video right now? At home, at school, or at work? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing from each and every one of you. 7 years earlier, Emily Carter's world had collapsed in the space of a single afternoon. She was 10 years old, sitting in her fourth grade classroom when the principal's secretary appeared at the door with that particular expression adults wore when they had to deliver news that would change everything. Emily had been called to the office, her classmates watching with the mixture of sympathy and relief that children feel when tragedy touches someone else's life. Her mother, Susan Carter, had been driving home from her job at the local insurance office when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact had been instant and fatal. In one terrible moment, Emily lost not just her mother, but the stable, middle-class life her parents had carefully built. Susan had been the family's primary breadwinner, her steady salary and benefits package allowing Mark to work part-time while pursuing his associate's degree in education. He had dreamed of becoming a teacher, inspired by Emily's love of learning and his own desire to make a difference in young people's lives. But dreams, Emily learned, are fragile things that don't survive the harsh realities of sudden loss. Mark had to drop out of school immediately. The life insurance payout was modest, barely enough to cover the funeral expenses and a few months of mortgage payments. Faced with the choice between losing their small house and taking any job he could find, Mark swallowed his pride and applied for the only position available that offered immediate employment and health benefits: custodial work at Lincoln High School. The transition from their comfortable suburban life to barely scraping by had been jarring for both of them. Emily watched her father transform from a man with ambitions and plans into someone who left before dawn and returned after dark, his hands permanently stained with cleaning chemicals, and his eyes holding a weariness that hadn't been there before. Their new reality was a small apartment on the edge of town, chosen because it was within walking distance of the school where Mark worked. The walls were thin, the heat inadequate, and the neighbors were mostly other families hanging on by their fingernails. But it was what they could afford, and Mark was grateful to have anything at all. For Emily, starting middle school as the janitor's daughter had been a crash course in social hierarchy she'd never needed before. Her old friends from elementary school slowly drifted away, their parents no longer encouraging play dates now that Emily lived on the wrong side of town. New classmates sized her up quickly, placing her in the category of kids who brought free lunch tickets and wore the same clothes multiple days in a row. The cruelty hadn't been dramatic or obvious. It was subtler than that. The way conversations stopped when she approached, the way she was never quite included in group projects, the way teachers spoke to her with a tone of lowered expectations that suggested they were already apologizing for her circumstances. Maybe Emily should focus on more practical goals, her 7th grade guidance counselor had suggested when Emily expressed interest in honors classes. Not everyone is cut out for advanced academics. There's nothing wrong with following in your father's footsteps. But Emily had something that poverty couldn't touch: an insatiable hunger for knowledge and a work ethic inherited from both parents. While her father cleaned the school each evening, Emily would sit in empty classrooms doing homework under fluorescent lights, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and the echo of her father's footsteps in distant hallways. She discovered that being invisible had its advantages. Teachers forgot she was there and left textbooks open, allowing her to read ahead in subjects she found fascinating. She overheard conversations about college preparation strategies that her guidance counselor had never shared with her. She learned about scholarship opportunities from announcements that were supposedly meant for the right kind of students. Mark, despite his exhaustion, made sure Emily understood that their circumstances were temporary, not defining. "Your mother believed you could do anything," he told her during one of their quiet dinners of spaghetti and canned sauce. "She used to say you had the kind of mind that could change the world. I won't let our situation make you forget that." So Emily studied with an intensity that worried her teachers and amazed her classmates. She checked out college-level books from the public library, staying until closing time because their apartment was too small and too loud for serious concentration. She wrote essays that made her English teachers do double takes, solving math problems that challenged students 2 grades ahead of her. But perhaps most importantly, she watched her father work with dignity and purpose. She saw how he took pride in keeping the school clean and safe for students, how he knew every teacher's name and remembered their birthdays, how he stayed late to make sure the gym was perfect for school dances that Emily was never invited to attend. Mark Carter had taught his daughter that there was honor in any honest work, but he had also made sure she understood that she had choices he'd never had. Emily carried both lessons with her as she quietly, methodically built an academic record that would eventually demand attention from people who had never bothered to learn her name. By senior year, Emily Carter had become impossible to ignore, though many people tried. The transformation began slowly, like sunlight gradually warming a room that had been cold for too long. In the immediate aftermath of Emily's speech, the auditorium had buzzed with a different kind of energy. Students who had never really noticed her before found themselves looking at Emily Carter with new eyes. Parents whispered to each other about the poised young woman who had spoken with such eloquence about dignity and hard work. But it was Mrs. Patricia Rodriguez, the guidance counselor, who took the first concrete step toward change. She had been working at Lincoln High for 15 years, long enough to see patterns in how students were treated based on their family circumstances. Emily's speech had struck a nerve, reminding Mrs. Rodriguez of her own childhood as the daughter of immigrant farm workers who had cleaned office buildings at night to pay for her education. The morning after the assembly, Mrs. Rodriguez pulled Emily's academic file and really looked at it for the first time. What she found astonished her. Emily hadn't just maintained a 4.0 GPA while dealing with financial hardship. She had taken every advanced placement course the school offered, scored in the 99th percentile on standardized tests, and somehow found time to tutor struggling students during her lunch periods. Her teacher's comments painted a picture of a student who was not just academically gifted, but genuinely committed to helping others succeed. How did we miss this? Mrs. Rodriguez asked herself, realizing that Emily had been achieving excellence in plain sight while being virtually invisible to the school's recognition systems. Mrs. Rodriguez began making phone calls. She contacted Dr. James Harrison, the district's superintendent, sharing Emily's story and academic achievements. She reached out to Mrs. Elizabeth Warren, president of the local Parent-Teacher Association, whose own children had benefited from Emily's quiet tutoring sessions. She spoke with local business leaders who provided scholarships, many of whom had never heard of Emily, despite her obvious qualifications. "This young woman has been flying under our radar," Mrs. Rodriguez explained during a hastily arranged meeting with the school's administrative team. "We've been so focused on our usual high achievers that we've overlooked someone extraordinary." The ripple effects spread beyond the school's walls. Dr. Sarah Chen, a local pediatrician whose daughter attended Lincoln High, had been in the audience during Emily's speech. Dr. Chen herself had grown up as the daughter of a restaurant dishwasher, and Emily's words had brought back memories of her own struggles with perception and prejudice. "That girl has something special," Dr. Chen told her husband that evening. "The way she spoke about her father, the dignity she gave to his work, that kind of character can't be taught." Dr. Chen began her own investigation into Emily's background, discovering through the parent network that Emily had been quietly extraordinary for years. She had organized study groups for students struggling in advanced classes, never seeking credit or recognition. She had used her small part-time job income to buy supplies for the school library. She had even started an informal mentoring program for younger students whose parents worked in service industries. "She's been leading by example all along," Dr. Chen realized. "We just weren't paying attention." The local newspaper editor, Michael Torres, heard about Emily's speech through his daughter, who was a junior at Lincoln High. Intrigued by the story of academic excellence emerging from an unexpected source, he assigned a reporter to investigate further. What the reporter found was a story that went far beyond one remarkable student. Emily's quiet leadership had created a network of mutual support among Lincoln High's most overlooked students. Kids whose parents worked as housekeepers, landscapers, and retail clerks had formed study groups, shared resources, and supported each other academically under Emily's informal guidance. "She never made it about herself," explained Maria Santos, whose mother cleaned offices downtown and who had raised her own GPA by 2 points with Emily's help. "She just saw that some of us needed extra support and figured out how to provide it. The newspaper story, titled "The Valedictorian They Almost Overlooked," ran on the front page of the Sunday edition. It detailed not just Emily's academic achievements, but her quiet philanthropy and leadership within the school's most underserved population. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Letters poured into the school from alumni who remembered their own struggles with social prejudice. Local businesses offered internships and scholarship opportunities. The university that Emily planned to attend called to discuss additional financial aid packages. But perhaps most importantly, Lincoln High School began examining its own systems and biases. "We need to ask ourselves some hard questions," Principal Walsh announced during a faculty meeting. "How many other Emily Carters have we overlooked? How many students are achieving excellence without recognition because they don't fit our traditional expectations?" The school implemented new policies for identifying and supporting high-achieving students from all backgrounds. They created mentorship programs that paired successful students like Emily with younger peers facing similar challenges. And in the hallways of Lincoln High, something had shifted. Students who had once been invisible began to be seen. The social hierarchy that had seemed so rigid began to show cracks, allowing merit and character to matter more than family income or parental profession. Emily Carter had done more than give a speech. She had started a quiet revolution, one that spread through her school and community like ripples across still water. 3 days after the newspaper article appeared, Mark Carter was mopping the floor of the main hallway when Principal Walsh approached him with an unusual request. "Mark, could I speak with you privately? There's someone here who would like to meet both you and Emily." In the principal's office waited Robert Sterling, a distinguished man in his 60s who owned Sterling Industries, one of the region's largest manufacturing companies. His daughter had graduated from Lincoln High 5 years earlier, and he had read about Emily's story with deep interest. "Mr. Carter," Sterling began, extending his hand to Mark with genuine respect, "I wanted to thank you for raising such an exceptional young woman. Your daughter's speech has had quite an impact on our community." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair, still wearing his custodial uniform and acutely aware of the contrast between his appearance and Sterling's expensive suit. "Emily's always been special," Mark said quietly. "She gets her drive from her mother." Sterling nodded sympathetically. "I understand you lost your wife several years ago. That must have been incredibly difficult." "We managed," Mark replied, his voice carefully neutral. Sterling leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Mr. Carter, I'm here because I believe in recognizing exceptional talent. I'd like to offer Emily a full scholarship to any university she chooses, plus a generous stipend for living expenses. Additionally, I'd like to offer you a position with my company, facilities management, with significantly better pay and benefits than your current position." Mark's eyes widened, but before he could respond, Emily spoke from the doorway. "That's very generous, Mr. Sterling, but I have to decline the scholarship." Both men turned to stare at her. Emily had arrived for their arranged meeting and had overheard the conversation from the hallway. "Emily," Mark started, but she held up a gentle hand. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate your kindness more than I can express," Emily said, taking a seat beside her father. "But there are students in this school who need that scholarship more than I do. Students whose families can't afford to send them to college at all, who don't have the grades I've been blessed with to earn academic scholarships." Sterling looked puzzled. "But Emily, this would give you complete financial freedom. You could attend any school, pursue any dream." Emily smiled, but her expression remained resolute. "I've already been accepted to State University with a partial academic scholarship. Dad and I have figured out how to make the finances work. We don't need charity. We need to earn our way." "This isn't charity," Sterling protested. "This is recognition of merit." "With respect, sir, if I had been the daughter of a doctor or lawyer with the same grades and achievements, would you have sought me out specifically to offer this scholarship?" Sterling paused, clearly uncomfortable with the implication of her question. Emily continued gently, "I appreciate that you want to help, but I've learned something important from my father, that there's dignity in earning what you receive. I want to succeed knowing that I did it through my own efforts." Mark felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. "Emily, honey, this could make things so much easier." "Dad, you've already given me everything I need. You've shown me that honest work has value, that character matters more than circumstances, and that I should never be ashamed of where I come from. Emily reached over and squeezed her father's calloused hand. I don't need easy. I need to know that whatever I achieve, I earned it. She turned back to Sterling. But if you really want to help, there are other students here who could use that scholarship. Kids who work just as hard as I do, but haven't had the same academic opportunities. Would you consider redirecting your generosity toward them? Sterling studied Emily's face, seeing in her expression the same determination that had carried her through years of financial struggle and social invisibility. What about the job offer for your father? He asked. Emily looked at Mark, who had been listening to this conversation with growing amazement at his daughter's maturity. Dad should make his own decision about that, Emily said, but I hope he knows that I'm proud of the work he does, wherever he chooses to do it. Mark cleared his throat. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the offer, I truly do. But I've got 7 more years until Emily's brother graduates from middle school, and I want to be here to see him through high school too. This job lets me be present for my kids when they need me. Sterling shook his head in wonder. I've met a lot of families in my business career, but I've never encountered anything quite like this. You're turning down opportunities that most people would jump at. We're not turning down opportunities, Emily corrected gently. We're choosing the ones that align with our values. And we're suggesting that your generous offer might create even more good if directed towards students who truly have no other options. As Sterling left the school that afternoon, he carried with him a list of student names that Emily and Mrs. Rodriguez had compiled. Young people whose potential was being limited by financial circumstances rather than lack of ability. Within a month, the Sterling Educational Initiative had awarded scholarships to 12 Lincoln High students, creating opportunities for young people who had never dared to dream of college. Emily Carter had turned down a gift, but in doing so, she had multiplied its impact 12-fold. 2 weeks later, Principal Walsh called an unexpected assembly. Unlike the previous gathering, this one carried an air of mystery that had students and faculty buzzing with curiosity. The auditorium filled quickly, with even typically absent students showing up to see what the announcement might be. Emily sat in her usual seat in the front row, having no idea that she was about to become the center of attention once again. Beside her, her closest friend Jessica Martinez whispered theories about what the assembly might concern. Maybe they're announcing construction on the new science wing, Jessica suggested, or possibly changes to the graduation requirements. Emily nodded absently, her thoughts focused on the calculus test she had later that afternoon and the scholarship application essays she needed to finish over the weekend. Principal Walsh approached the podium with an unusual smile, carrying a sealed envelope that seemed to glow under the stage lights. Students and faculty, she began, I've been an educator for 25 years, and I've learned that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen in the most ordinary places. Today I have the privilege of sharing news that exemplifies the very best of what education can achieve. The auditorium settled into attentive silence. 3 months ago, a young woman stood on this stage and reminded us all that excellence comes in many forms, and that we should never judge people by their circumstances rather than their character. That speech touched many hearts and opened many eyes, including my own. Emily felt a flutter of recognition and anxiety. Was this about her? What that young woman didn't know, Principal Walsh continued, was that her speech was being recorded for our school district's documentation project. What she also didn't know was that someone in our district office decided to submit that recording, along with her academic portfolio, to the National Foundation for Educational Excellence. Emily's heart began to race. She had heard of the foundation. It was a prestigious organization that recognized outstanding high school students from across the country. Last week I received a phone call that I will never forget, Principal Walsh said, her voice growing emotional. Emily Carter, would you please join me on stage? The auditorium erupted in applause as Emily, her face pale with shock, slowly made her way to the stage. She could see her father standing at the back of the auditorium. He had been called away from his custodial duties for this emergency assembly. Emily, Principal Walsh said, placing a gentle hand on the young woman's shoulder, you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Foundation's Outstanding Student Achievement Award. This recognition comes with a full 4-year scholarship to any accredited university in the United States, including Ivy League institutions, plus a $50,000 stipend for additional educational expenses. Emily's knees went weak. The auditorium erupted in cheers, but she barely heard them through the rushing sound in her ears. But that's not all, Principal Walsh continued, having to raise her voice over the celebration. The foundation was so impressed by your story, your academic achievements, and your commitment to helping other students, that they have decided to establish a permanent scholarship fund in honor of your mother, Susan Carter. Emily began to cry, the tears flowing freely as years of struggle and determination culminated in this moment of recognition. The Susan Carter Memorial Scholarship Fund will provide annual scholarships for students who demonstrate academic excellence despite financial hardship. The fund begins with an initial endowment of $500,000, which will allow it to help deserving students for generations to come. Through her tears, Emily saw her father pushing through the crowd, his own eyes wet with emotion. When Mark reached the stage, he climbed the steps and wrapped his daughter in an embrace that said everything words couldn't express. "Dad," Emily whispered, "Mom would be so proud." "She is proud, baby girl," Mark replied, his voice thick with emotion. "She's watching, and she's proud of the woman you've become." The audience was on its feet now, the applause thunderous and sustained. Emily could see teachers wiping their eyes, students cheering with genuine enthusiasm, and parents nodding with approval and perhaps a new understanding. But in the crowd, Emily spotted the faces that mattered most to her, the students she had tutored, the kids whose parents worked in service industries, the young people who had felt invisible until her speech had reminded everyone that worth isn't determined by circumstances. Maria Santos was crying openly, knowing that she might now be eligible for the scholarship that could make college possible. David Kim, whose father worked at a dry cleaner, was applauding with tears streaming down his face. A dozen other students were experiencing the same realization, that Emily's recognition might open doors for them too. Dr. Chen, who was in the audience as a school board member, stepped forward to the microphone. "If I may," she said, waiting for the applause to quiet, "I think it's important that we all understand what just happened here. Emily Carter didn't just win a scholarship. She earned recognition that most students never achieve. But more importantly, she's used that recognition to create opportunities for others." Dr. Chen gestured toward the audience. "Emily insisted that individual scholarships be redirected to students with greater need. Now her achievement has created a permanent fund that will help countless young people. She has literally turned her success into a legacy of opportunity for others." The applause resumed, but this time it carried a different quality. Not just celebration, but respect and understanding. As the assembly concluded and students began to file out, Emily remained on stage with her father, still processing the magnitude of what had occurred. The scholarship meant she could attend any university she dreamed of, but more importantly, it validated years of quiet perseverance and faith in the value of education. "Emily," Principal Walsh said, approaching them as the auditorium emptied, "I owe you an apology. We should have recognized your achievements long before this. We should have seen what was right in front of us." Emily shook her head. "Mrs. Walsh, everything happens when it's supposed to happen. I'm just grateful that other students won't have to wait as long as I did." As they walked out of the auditorium together, Mark put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Your mother used to say that you were going to change the world," he said softly. "I think she was right." Emily smiled, already thinking about the scholarship applications she would help other students complete, the essays she would edit, and the dreams she would help make possible. How do you feel knowing the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Heroine so you never miss incredible stories like this one. 2 years later, Emily Carter walked across the campus of Harvard University, her crimson backpack slung over one shoulder and her phone pressed to her ear. Despite being hundreds of miles from home, she called her father every Sunday evening, a tradition that had become the anchor of both their weeks. "How's Professor Williams' constitutional law class?" Mark asked, the pride in his voice evident even through the phone connection. "Challenging but incredible," Emily replied, settling onto a bench overlooking the Charles River. "Dad, I still can't believe I'm here sometimes." "I can," Mark said simply. "Your mother always knew you'd end up somewhere amazing." Emily smiled, watching crew teams practice on the water below. Her dorm room was decorated with photos from home, including her favorite picture of her mother holding her as a baby. But it was these weekly conversations that kept her connected to the values that had shaped her. "How's the scholarship fund doing?" Emily asked, a question that had become part of their regular check-ins. "Mrs. Rodriguez says they've awarded scholarships to 47 students so far," Mark replied. "That Santos girl you helped tutor? She's doing great at State University, studying to be a teacher, and the Kim boy is at the community college studying engineering." Emily felt the familiar warmth that came from knowing that her moment of recognition had created opportunities for others. The Susan Carter Memorial Scholarship had grown beyond its initial endowment, with donations from community members who had been inspired by Emily's story. "And how's your new assistant working out?" Emily asked, referring to the recent addition to Lincoln High's custodial staff. Mark chuckled. "Tommy's a good kid. Reminds me a lot of myself when I started here. He's actually taking night classes at the community college, studying business administration. I think he's got bigger plans than cleaning schools forever." "Like father, like daughter," Emily said. "We both seem to end up mentoring people." The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. Just as Emily had quietly helped struggling students throughout high school, Mark had taken several young custodial workers under his wing over the years, encouraging them to pursue education and supporting their ambitions. "Speaking of mentoring," Mark continued, "I got a call from Principal Walsh yesterday. They want to name the new tutoring center after you." "Dad, no," Emily protested. "That's too much." "That's exactly what I told them you'd say," Mark laughed. "So I suggested they name it after your mother instead, the Susan Carter Academic Support Center. What do you think?" Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. "I think Mom would love knowing that her name is helping kids learn." "Construction starts this summer. Mrs. Rodriguez is going to run it, and they're hiring college students as tutors. Guess who they want to be their first summer intern when you come home?" "I'd be honored," Emily said, already imagining the impact such a center could have on students who felt invisible or overlooked. Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice calling Emily's name. She turned to see her roommate Sarah approaching, along with 3 other students from their study group. "Emily, are you coming to dinner?" Sarah called. "We're discussing the community service project proposals." Emily held up a finger, indicating she needed another moment. "Dad, I have to go. We're working on establishing a mentorship program for first-generation college students here at Harvard." "Of course you are," Mark said, the warmth in his voice unmistakable. "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become, Em. But I hope you know that you've always been enough. Scholarship or no scholarship, Harvard or no Harvard." "I know, Dad, and I hope you know that I've always been proud to be your daughter, the custodian's daughter who happened to get good grades." As Emily ended the call and joined her friends, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that day she'd taken the microphone at Lincoln High. She was studying at one of the world's most prestigious universities, surrounded by brilliant classmates from around the globe. But the values that had shaped her remained constant: hard work, humility, and the belief that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, rather than what their circumstances might suggest. In her constitutional law textbook, Emily had bookmarked a quote from Justice Thurgood Marshall. "None of us got where we are solely by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We got here because somebody bent down and helped us pick up our boots." Emily Carter understood that truth better than most. She had been lifted up by her father's sacrifice, her teacher's belief, and her community's eventual recognition. Now it was her turn to bend down and help others find their own path to success. Never judge a person by their profession or circumstances, because sometimes those who seem ordinary are the ones accomplishing the most extraordinary things. If you believe that self-respect and determination will always find a way to shine, please subscribe to Hidden Heroine. Let's spread these heartwarming stories together.